I'm Mikey. I am the son of Pinky and Ronnie, number 6. Nobody's actually asked me to eulogize anyone before. Siguro naman, I'm not young enough to get the favor of being the youngest of my parents. And I'm the middle son, so all of these occasions kind of pass me. So we'll see if anyone asks me to do it again after tonight, but we'll see. So I didn't really grow up with Grandma, but there were times when she would be living with us in Virginia, and so my younger memories of her were mostly based on that, of visits and maybe months at a time when she would be living with us. I actually like what you said, Tita Nini, because it's a departure from the last couple of nights of what people were saying. Grandma was super famous for her sharp tongue. If anyone is close to her, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Pero siguro naman because, again, I'm one of the older ones of the younger batch of grandkids. I benefited from her sharpness dulling over time. So I personally don't carry too much trauma from her words. On the contrary, I actually found her funny. I mean, maybe I wasn't as fat as some of the other cousins or siblings, so I wasn't really an easy target. I'm still fat, but not so much to gain her notice, I guess. But my younger memories of Grandma were always, actually mostly just quiet companionship with her. She would come to Virginia because she would be sewing the dresses and costumes of my mom's shows, and like literally that was for months. She was just doing the same pattern and just doing it for like 100 different girls. Sometimes, I hated this, but sometimes my mom would buy fabric from the fabric store, and then she would just suddenly make matching outfits with me and my younger brother, and I hated that. But now in hindsight, I'm like, that's amazing. How can you just make clothing from scratch, from fabric, right? I remember her morning crosswords. I remember just watching TV in the basement with her Murder, She Wrote. And that was, mostly, my childhood memories of her was Scrabble and just, she just liked your company. At least that's what it was with me. Over the last few nights, I've actually learned a lot about her. I learned from Tita Eddie that, she was an introvert. And maybe that's why, I felt just so comfortable just sitting next to her, not really talking, but just kind of, we're both just doing our own thing next to each other, and that was enough. When I got a little bit older, then Grandma started to be cool. Because Grandma drinks beer, and Grandma gambles and stuff, right? So when I had some of the sharp words, but I would always be like, oh, Grandma, like, well, what do you do for work? I work for my dad. What are you gonna do? A real job? I'm like, right? But then one funny stage of my life, I actually played poker for a living for a while. And so Grandma comes to me, well, what do you do for work now? Actually, Grandma, I play poker. Oh. And so actually, our bonding became, I would take her to the casino with me. And, I would never see her smile as big as when I give her balato for whatever it is. So that was a special time for us. Like, of course, Was that only me? I mean, we would go to like Manila, we go to the Hyatt, the Hilton, the casinos together. Sorry, Mom, I don't know if you know about it. But one of the best ones was I took her to Atlantic City in the States with some of my college friends, and so I introduced her to my college friends. And, oh, your grandma's such a badass, I'm like, yeah, she is, right? And so we're out doing our college age stuff, and grandma's like, I'm gonna go to the casino. Don't look for me, huh? Okay, sure. And then somehow, around 1 a.m., Grandma finds me. She's like, Miguel, I need to borrow $500. What? Why? I have to recover. I'm like, okay, Grandma, here. She's like, don't look for me, huh? I'm like, okay. And so I continued doing my thing with my friends. And then, so we're around 4 a.m. now. She finds me. She's like, oh, Miguel, here's your money back. I'm like, oh, what'd you do? She's like, I recovered. I'm up 200. I'm like, oh, all right, Grandma. And so that was, it's funny because, again, I avoided a lot of her, most of her ire, right? One of the more funny times was when, and the other thing about grandma, so besides gambling, I always remember she always had beer, well, like one beer, not a lot, but it was always like a Budweiser, right? And so I actually, for a time, I was working for Budweiser in their headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri. But I told grandma, so again, it's like, she asked like 4 things to her grandkids. It's like, are you married yet? Or you have kids? And where do you work? So where do you work? My grandma, I work at Budweiser. Oh. So, I don't know. I guess I was lucky. I was spared from most of the venom, and even when it was in my direction, I always just laughed at like, Grandma, you're so funny. So we moved back to the Philippines around 2019, and at that point she had already kind of started to have some dementia, and she was still herself at that point, but our conversations would kind of be repeating already. At first, just to mess with her, I'd be like, what are you doing for work? Grandma, I'm a lawyer already. I'm not a lawyer. So 20 minutes later, she would ask again. I'm like, oh, I'm telling her the truth right then. I work for my dad. Well, when are you going to get a real job? So the, it was kind of hard to see her in that state, but still funny, right? Grandma, did you drive her? Of course I did. She didn't back there, but she was just so stubborn and so sure that she drove there, right? That I found it endearing. But then when the pandemic happened, it really progressed quickly, and then it became hard to see her, to visit her. It was a bit more sad. I would introduce her to my kids. She would just be staring at them, studying their faces. Then she would stare at me, and Grandma, do you remember who I am? Sometimes she wouldn't remember, but sometimes she'd be like, there you go. Yeah, Grandma, of course. I remember when we would go to the casinos together and stuff, and I would try and mention things that we used to do together. So as time passed, and it got even worse, right? So I was already kind of sad when that was the limit of our conversations already. But then, but when it got worse, when she wasn't really talking anymore, she wasn't really engaging very much. I actually longed for those conversations where she would just kind of be like, "Where do you work? What's your, where do you live? Is there snow? Where do you work? Where do you live? Is there snow?" Like, I kind of missed that. One of the last interactions I had with her was on her 99th birthday, just a couple months ago. And syempre naman, we had the usual rigmarole that we Mendozas do, where like we made our kids sing, and grandma's just sitting there absorbing it all. But after it all kind of died down, I just sat next to grandma, just quietly, just sitting next to her, as she was just kind of absorbing everything that's going around. And then she started to talk to me. Because kanina other people were just like, "Hi grandma, do you know who I am?" And just kind of getting in her face, and you know, she kind of engaged a little bit, but I felt that when I sat next to her, just without any agenda other than just sitting next to her, and she noticed me, then she started to kind of try to have a conversation with me. I wish I could remember what it is that she was talking about. I think she was talking about Pangatan, she was talking about things that she could remember, probably just things off the top of her head that she could make conversation about. But you know, I found that kind of fitting based on the relationship that we had, where it wasn't anything. We were just comfortable being next to each other. That was my experience with grandma. And I was trying to figure out, when she passed, how I felt about her passing. And I couldn't understand why I was happy. I think knowing who she was, it was hard to see her just kind of hang on. Every time I would visit her, I'd be like, "Grandma, how are you?" "Still alive, we're still here." And it was hard to kind of put into words why I felt that way. But I also knew Grandma to be very devout. She was a woman of faith. She placed her trust in Jesus. And so, for me, when I heard the news, I'm like, "Oh, thank God she's going to be with Grandpa." I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that she's in heaven, like now. She outlived Grandpa by 25 years. All of her sisters, and there's no more loneliness where she is. There's no more suffering. There's no more sickness. And so, when I was trying to figure out how, or kind of understand myself why, or what I was feeling, I came across this verse, 1 Corinthians verse 15, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 55. So, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" "Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" But thanks be to God, He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. And I read that a few times, and I think where that feeling, that I was feeling, comes from, is just I'm so secure in the knowledge that Grandma is with our Lord now, that she is joyfully reunited with Grandpa, joyfully in the presence of Jesus, and I celebrate that. Of course, we're sad that temporarily we won't get to see her, but for me, I've never been, quite as sure about anything other than, for sure, like, she's in a much better place than if we had just tried to keep her holding on for that 100-year celebration that the Mendozas were really wanting to do.
Yes.
We'll celebrate nonetheless next year, I'm sure. And I guess I want to say, Grandma, I love you. I know you're happy now. I know you're at peace, and we'll miss you for now. But we're all called to Christ's kingdom. We're all called to put our faith in Jesus, that we might all enter His kingdom. So I know that this is not the end, and I take solace in that. Anyway, that's it for my first eulogy. Hopefully it was acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you all for that.